Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I have with me Carole Boston Weatherford, and she is a children's book writer and picture books, I believe. And I'm going to let you describe a little bit more about what you write, Carole.
Right. I do write picture books, but I also write middle grade and young adult books.
Right.
I am primarily a poet and a historian. So I write about family stories, fading traditions, and forgotten struggles with a focus on African American heritage and culture. And I have more than 60 books, and a few of them have won some pretty pretty shiny awards like Caldecott Honors and Newbery Honor and others.
Wonderful. And so, what can readers expect from your newest book, which I believe is Unspeakable?
I do have Unspeakable is my latest nonfiction book, and it is about the subtitle is The Tulsa Race Massacre. So it's about the worst incident of racial violence in US history, which was the 1921 massacre that took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that left at least 300 people dead and 8,000 homeless. And these were, mostly people from the African American community who had been attacked by a white mob. So that's my latest book. But I also have a little gift book that just came out, and it's called Dreams for a Daughter. And it is a mother's hopes. It conveys a mother's hopes for her daughter. So that's somewhat personal for me since I do have a daughter.
Aha. Yes. So, what was the inspiration for your newest book? Well, I would assume that the Tulsa book is history, but
Right.
what was the inspiration for Dreams for a Daughter?
Well, not only am I the mother of a daughter, I'm the mother of a son. And so I had already written a book called In Your Hands, which is it's a mother's prayer for a son. And it's a Black Lives Matter prayer. And if you do something for one child, you kind of have to do the same thing for the other. So that book came out in 2017. And actually it was the illustrator's idea to write a companion book to In Your Hands, because he also has a son and a daughter. And so we just wanted to, kind of balance the scales. But both of those books are very personal for me.
Aha. And what were the steps that you took to bring it from initial inspiration to a finished product?
Well, I had to dig deep, and it was a different kind of digging because as a nonfiction author, I'm used to doing research. And for those books, I kind of had to search my heart and my soul, and think back to how I felt when my kids first came into the world and when I was raising them. They're now both young adults. So I just, I had to like search within myself, which is somewhat different for me because I'm used to documenting history as opposed to documenting my own feelings.
Hmm. Okay, going back to the Tulsa book, what kind of research went into writing it?
Fortunately, there are several institutions in Oklahoma that have archived material about the Tulsa Race Massacre. The Greenwood Cultural Institute, Greenwood Cultural Association. The race massacre actually took place in the Black community known as Greenwood. So they have a website, and there's also a map of 1921 Tulsa on that website. And the state and local historical societies also were a source of information. But the biggest source, and the probably the most important source, is the report of the Tulsa Race Massacre Commission. The commission was charged with investigating the race massacre, and they were charged with that task by the Oklahoma State Legislature. And the report was issued in 1996, 75 years after the race massacre took place. So
Wow.
I relied on research that had been done, by others, and also read some, oral history, personal accounts of the massacre.
Wow. And how difficult was it to take that information and make it so that children would be interested in that?
That's always a challenge when I'm writing nonfiction for children, and particularly when I write about tough topics, difficult
Right.
subject matter. But I do it. I have a responsibility not only to make the material age appropriate for children, but to also be true to my ancestors, to the people
Mhm.
who actually lived through these events. So I have, a twofold responsibility. So first and foremost, I want to tell the truth, but I want to tell it in an age appropriate way. Fortunately, I'm also a poet, so poetry helps me to not only through poetry, I'm not only able to describe and in detail the circumstances, but also to find the right words for my audience. So it's, the text is very concise, but also very powerful. Poetry relies on an economy of language, as do picture book manuscripts. So the two kind of work together for me.
Mhm. Yeah.
But one
Um,
one thing I did is I took a forensic approach. For fans of shows like Law and Order and CSI, they know what I'm talking about. You've got to recreate the crime scene. And so rather than focusing just on the massacre itself and detailing all the, blood and gore, which I don't do, I take 2/3 of the book to recreate the community of Greenwood, to show the kind of pride and prosperity that existed within that Black community in 1921 prior to the massacre. So, that I took it upon myself to do that rather than to just dwell on the violence.
mhm. That seems like a great way to bring it to kids. Yeah. Um, what is your favorite research story of all the books that you've done?
Hmm. There are a few, and I don't know if it's a favorite, but sometimes I find things out about myself, or I find that I have something in common with the person that I'm writing about. So one story is when I was working on my book Before John Was a Jazz Giant, a song of John Coltrane, which is, I call it an unbiography because it focuses on the soundscape of his childhood. I discovered that my great aunt had been his third grade teacher.
Wow,
So
fascinating.
you find these connections. And another thing, another bit of information I discovered, or in fact, it's an image that I discovered in researching my family's history on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, is within a book, an artist's book, I found a photograph of my great great grandfather who had been born into slavery. And I had never seen his picture before.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So what's the biggest challenge in writing and putting out the book about Tulsa, the Tulsa race
Well, first of all, I wasn't
massacre?
sure that I was going to be able to find a publisher who was receptive to doing a picture book about the topic. And this is not the typical, picture book audience of 4 to 8. This is an older picture book audience, like kids 8 to 12. So it's really a middle grade book,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's a picture book. So that was, as I embarked on the project, that was probably um, top of mind. Am I going to even be able to find a publisher for this? So that was a prime concern. I'm used to, the writing I can do. I do that every day. But as far as, getting a manuscript to a point where a publisher will want to acquire it, that's always a challenge, and always dicey. You just never know until the manuscript is, you think it's finished.
Mm-hmm. So that was the biggest challenge. And how did you overcome that challenge?
Well, there was a bit of serendipity. I had an editor in mind, and I'm one of these people who's horrible with faces. And it just so happened I was at a conference. Often I write when I'm on the road, and at least I did that in the before time, so to speak. And I was at a conference and I thought to myself, well, maybe I'll run into this editor in the exhibit area. And but the conference, I think, was shutting down that day, and I had to leave. And I said, well, I probably will miss her. And because I would rather pitch it. I preferred to pitch it face to face. And so I was sitting at the breakfast table in the restaurant, in the hotel restaurant, and a lady came over to me and said, "Do you mind if I sit with you?" And of course, I didn't recognize her face, and it was that editor. So I got to talk with her about it. She was very interested, and when I finished it, I did send the manuscript to her as promised.
That's wonderful. Well, what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, I've got a book coming out in the fall about a woman from my hometown, my hometown is Baltimore, Maryland, whom I've admired from afar for a long time. And she's a very important person in our country, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House.
Wonderful.
So the title of the book is Madam Speaker.
Aha, great. I have some questions now about being a writer. What is your favorite part of being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
I like finishing the first draft because even though no one ever sees it, when I finish a first draft and read it, I think it's wonderful. And then I may let it sit for a day or two or three or a week, and then I read it and I'll say, wow, that sucks. But when I get that first draft, it's like having a new baby. Oh, this is the most beautiful baby. Yeah, so that I enjoy getting that first draft out, because I know if I can get the first draft, at least I have something to work with, even if it's not as great as I thought it was when I initially read it.
Okay. And what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
Well, that may be one and the same, getting that first draft out, but I suppose I really suppose that the revision process is the hardest part, because that's where I spend most of my time. I tell kids when I do school visits that I do so many rewrites that I don't even count how many rewrites I have done. So that's probably the most challenging part, doing those rewrites and then knowing when it's ready to show someone else, like an editor or my agent.
Do you find a lot that your rewrites, after you finish your rewrites, that it's not at all the same as your first draft?
Oh, that's often the case. And in many, sometimes, they wouldn't even recognize each other as family, There's like no relationship at all. But, a lot of times because I am writing nonfiction, my first draft is burdened with a lot of facts. So I'm trying to figure out which details do I want to include. And it's hard to, get all those facts out and then have them look pretty and sound pretty at the same time. So I get all the facts out, and then I begin to reshape the narrative during the revision process.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So what's been your favorite adventure during your whole writing career?
Well, one of them would probably be hearing that my book won my book Box, when Henry Brown Mails Himself to Freedom, had won a Newbery honor. I had gotten notices before, about Caldecott honors and Seibert honors, and Coretta Scott King honors. So I had been, kind of been through the process, but I had never been through the process during a pandemic year. So in the past, the phone calls, some committees call the night before, and some award committees call on the morning of the ALA Youth Media Awards. So I got on the Sunday before that Monday, I got a call, and it said, you should do something, push something to join a Zoom call. And my boyfriend's a techie, and I said, well, I said, this is a scam. Somebody's trying to scam me. I'm not, he said, no, it's probably not a scam. I said, I think it is. And he had planned a Zoom call with some family later that day. And I said, you didn't send me you didn't do this, did you? He said, no. So I hung up. And then I got a call back from one of the committee members and saying, this is the American Library Association, and you're going to receive another call about the Zoom. And would you please follow the instructions and join the call? So I almost missed receiving the award, I guess.
Oh, wow. So what's the greatest lesson that you've learned so far in your writing career?
The greatest lesson, that you never know how a book is going to be received in the marketplace, in terms of reviews or in terms of accolades. But the greatest reward is not an award like a shiny sticker or a trophy. It's that kids whom I may never meet are reading my book and perhaps learning something from those books.
Right. So what piece of advice would you want to share with other writers?
Persevere. And that's a piece of advice for any creative person. Just, persevere, definitely, practice your craft every day if you can, and persevere, and just be willing to put in the time and keep going.
Okay. And are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you'd recommend to other people that have helped you during your career?
I'm a member of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which is an international organization of children's book creators. It's based in Los Angeles. So I would tell any aspiring or emerging children's book creator to affiliate with that organization, because there's a wealth of information that and resources that the organization, that SCBWI as it's known, offers to its members. So definitely join that. Check out the website of the Children's Book Council, because that organization compiles a directory of members, and the members then indicate what kinds of manuscripts they're looking for at any given time. It's a very up-to-date directory that's free of charge. So I would say, tap into those two resources. And if there is an organization of writers in your city or in your state, join that organization and find a critique group, because that's writers need feedback, and your best friend or your relative is not going to be very objective.
Right. Now I have questions about you as a person.
Okay.
What is the one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Most people probably don't know that I used to design clothes.
Wow.
When I was in my early 20s. That was my original career aspiration.
Ah, interesting. How long did you do that for?
I hadn't long enough to figure out that I didn't want to move to New York.
Aha.
So I did it the year before, and the year that I graduated from college. So I did it about 2 years, and I had clothes in boutiques in the city where I grew up in Baltimore. But I abandoned the dream when I realized that I would probably have to go to New York to make a career of it. At that time, they didn't have these reality shows like Project Runway. They didn't have that.
Wow. All right. And what question do you wish interviewers would ask you? And what would your answer be?
Oh, now that's a good question. I don't know. That's a hard one.
It is.
Where would I like to be right now? How about that?
Okay, where would you like to be right now?
At the beach. At the beach. I love, given the choice between the beach and the mountains, it's always going to be the beach for me. Not that I dislike the mountains, but I prefer the beach.
So which beach?
Well, I'm in North Carolina, so maybe
Ah,
maybe the Outer Banks.
oh, nice. Okay. So what is or are your passions when you're not writing? What and how do you make time for your hobbies and things that you love?
I don't have much time for them, to be honest. I can tell you what
Yep.
my passion is creating things, and so sometimes it means creating a meal. I cook just about everything from scratch. I very rarely eat packaged foods. Um, I love to paint, but I don't do it very often. That might be another thing most people don't know about me, that I paint.
Mm,
And my passion is history, and my greatest passion though is my family.
okay. Um, what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you while you're writing or editing?
My writing space look is my lap. So I need to have preferably my legs covered up because laptops get a little warm. I have had offices before, and I have an office now, but I rarely work in it. I'm sitting in my office now, but I don't. I have techie neck, so I don't do so well at a desk. I do
Okay.
better with a laptop, and I have a stand. I do have a standing desk, but I use that mainly to display books when I'm doing Zoom sessions nowadays.
So that means you can actually write anywhere.
Exactly, exactly. That's where my studio is, my lab.
Okay. And what do you have any food or drink that you'd like to have with you whenever you're writing?
No, no.
Okay.
I do. I like chai tea, but I don't have to have it to write. And
And
I don't have it every day.
okay. And while you're writing, do you prefer music or silence?
I prefer silence because I can hear. I'm a poet, and poetry is very musical, and I need to be able to hear the music of language in my head as I write.
Hmm.
So for that reason, even if I'm writing a musical book, I'm not going to listen to music while I'm writing. But sometimes I can hear music when I write in my head,
Ah, you
particularly
can.
if I'm writing about a musical subject,
Okay. Now,
which I've done quite a bit.
do you sometimes, when you write poetry, do you sometimes put your poems to music?
No, no. I used to do that very early in my career when I was writing for adults. I used to go to, the coffee shops and galleries and do readings, and sometimes they were accompanied by a musician, but I haven't done that in a long time.
Ah, okay.
It's not that I wouldn't love to, but once publishers hold the rights, if publishers hold the rights, then that becomes complicated, if I want to record it. So.
Right. Now, writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help them with their work. And do you have any of those? And do they help or hinder you?
Well, this was it right here. I skinned it. No, that's not it. This is fake fur, but I do have a furry companion. I call her my dogter. She probably thinks my latest book is Dreams for a Dogter. And her name is Gigi, and she has a crook in her tail. She's a beagle,
Ah,
but she's a very small beagle. I think I inherited her from some neighbors when she was 5 months old. They couldn't handle her, and she's been with me ever since. And I think she came out of a puppy mill, but she's very, very babyfied. Let's put it that way. My daughter says she's babyfied.
baby fight. I like that.
Babyfied, yeah.
Ah, so
And
does
she's
she
very
hinder you or
sweet.
help you when you're writing?
She sits beside me, and when she does, sometimes has her hip against my thigh, and that's almost certain to, with the laptop on my lap, to bring on a hot flash. So yeah, she's like very helpful, very helpful. And she also sometimes puts her head on my lap or on the computer, on the laptop. So yeah, very, very helpful.
Aha. Okay. Does she sometimes put her paw on it and start
Yes, she does.
typing?
Yes, she does. Yeah, she writes as well.
I see. Okay. Um, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And just going to say that if you would like any of Carole's books, we can order them for you at orders at anniesbooksworcester.com. And you can call us at 508-796-5613. But where else could you find your books?
Well, they are available from local and online booksellers. You probably know that have a favorite online bookseller, and if you have a favorite independent bookstore in your area, you can get the books there. As Selena said, if the books are not in stock, they can be ordered from any of those places. And you can also go on the African American Book Project.org to order my books.
Oh, great. And how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
You can follow me on Twitter. I am Poet Weatherford on Twitter. And on Facebook, and Instagram, I'm Carole Weatherford.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That's all the questions I have for you.
Thank
And
you.
it was really nice having you. And hopefully, if you ever get to the Boston or Worcester area, you'll come and visit us at the store.
I'd love to. And I neglected to say that my grandmother's name was Annie. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, and we will be seeing you.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.